All right, ready to dive into a real historical enigma. Grigori Rasputin, you sent over some excerpts from his Wikipedia page and a biography from biography.com, and well, let's unpack it all.
It's a challenge for sure over a century, and historians are still trying to separate fact from fiction. Even his name is like a tangled web.
Yeah, Rasputin, most people think licentious, right? Adds to that mysterious persona. But our sources say it's not about that at all. It's geographical, something about where two rivers meet near where he was born in Siberia.
Exactly, and it shows how quickly a misunderstanding can totally color how we see someone, especially a historical figure. I
Right.
mean, in Rasputin's case, that one word fed right into this idea of him as, like, sinister, which a lot of his political enemies pushed pretty hard.
So before we get to all the scandals and intrigue, let's go back to the beginning. Siberian peasant family, born around 1869, and our sources describe, well, kind of a troubled youth.
Limited formal education for sure. But he goes on these pilgrimages, and that seems like a major turning point. This is where he has his big religious awakening, visions, deep connection to the divine, all of that.
Classic hero's journey, almost. Humble beginnings, spiritual transformation, but obviously this hero's tale takes some dark turns.
Oh, absolutely. But that transformation from peasant to this spiritual seeker, that sets the stage for his rise. His reputation as a mystic and healer starts to spread, eventually reaches the Russian elite, and that draws him to St. Petersburg in the early 1900s.
And that's when he meets the Romanovs, right? I'm really curious about these black princesses, Militsa and Anastasia of Montenegro. Sources point to them as being key in introducing Rasputin to the Tsar and Tsarina.
Well, those two women, married to cousins of Tsar Nicholas II, they were super into mysticism and the occult, right? They already knew about Rasputin's healing reputation. They saw him as a possible answer to this really private, really desperate problem the royal family had, their son Alexei and his hemophilia.
And hemophilia, a condition that stops blood from clotting that was basically a death sentence back then.
Hmm.
The Tsarina must have been in agony, knowing her son, heir to the throne, could bleed to death at any moment.
Exactly. And it's into this world of fear and desperation that Rasputin steps in. Late 1906, they call him to pray for young Alexei. And here's the thing, whether coincidence or something more, Alexei gets better after Rasputin shows up.
Okay, we have to talk about the 1912 incident. This is where it gets really interesting, even from a medical point of view. Alexei, after a carriage ride, starts having a near-fatal hemorrhage. Doctors, totally helpless. The Tsarina, in desperation, telegraphs Rasputin.
Begs him to pray for Alexei. Now Rasputin's all the way in Siberia, but he sends a telegram back. God has seen your tears and heard your prayers. Do not grieve. The little one will not die. Do not allow the doctors to bother him too much.
And then, it's like something straight out of a medical mystery. Alexei's bleeding just stops. Defies medical explanation. Some historians suggest hypnosis, and then there's the aspirin connection.
Yes, the aspirin thing. See, back then, aspirin was common for pain, but nobody knew about its anticoagulant properties. So could Rasputin, by telling them to leave Alexei alone, have accidentally facilitated a treatment that was, beyond what the doctors understood at the time? Or was it just pure luck that convinced the Tsarina of his divine power?
It's the question, isn't it? Debated for decades. But one thing's for sure. After this, the Tsarina's faith in Rasputin is rock solid. And that's going to have huge consequences for Russia.
Oh, definitely. That moment, it cements Rasputin's place with the royal family. But his influence, it goes way beyond Alexei's sickbed and that power. It's about to meet some serious opposition.
Yeah, one event, like with Alexei and the ripple effects, are incredible. But I'm guessing not everyone was, celebrating Rasputin's newfound influence.
Oh, you're right on the money with that. Tsarina saw a savior, sure, but plenty of others in the Russian court, and outside of it, they saw suspicion, hostility, the whole nine yards. The more power he got, plus all those rumors and his unconventional behavior, it made him a target for criticism, that's for sure.
And he didn't exactly try to avoid making enemies either, did he? Our sources mention some pretty big clashes, even with the Bishop of Tobolsk, right? He launched an investigation into Rasputin, claiming he was spreading false teachings and doing all sorts of immoral stuff.
Even Prime Minister Stolypin, who was a pretty powerful guy in the Tsar's government, he saw the threat and tried to warn the Tsar about Rasputin. But the Tsarina, she was fiercely protective of her son and of Rasputin, and she just dismissed it all. Jealousy, political maneuvering, that's all it was to her.
It's crazy, this clash, right? People who thought Rasputin was holy versus those who saw him as a con man shows you how divided Russian society already was. And then, of course, you've got the accusations of sexual misconduct, rape, debauchery, the whole works. Hard to tell what's true and what's just, political mudslinging.
Yeah, that's the thing with history, right? Information warfare was alive and well back then, too. One of Rasputin's early followers, Kionia Berlatskaya, she accuses him of rape publicly in 1909. Really damages his reputation, gives his enemies more ammo. Whether it was true or made up, it didn't matter. It was used against him.
And then there's his relationship with the Tsar's children, described as unusually close, especially with the daughters, which I gotta say raised a lot of eyebrows, to put it mildly. Telegrams visiting them in their nightgowns, pretty unsettling, and definitely fueled those rumors of inappropriate behavior.
Well, you got to see it in context, right? Early 20th century Russia, maybe it wasn't seen as so out there, but even then, it definitely crossed lines, made people uncomfortable, even in the royal household.
Yeah, the sources talk about these two governesses, Sofia Ivanovna Tucheva and Maria Vishnyakova. Tucheva, she tries to get Rasputin banned from the nursery, tells other family members what's going on, but the Tsarina, she defends him, even fires Tucheva. And then Vishnyakova, she goes even further, accuses Rasputin of rape, which, again, the Tsarina denies completely.
It's like the Tsarina put Rasputin on this pedestal, a
Yeah.
holy man, protector of her family. She just refused to believe anything bad about him, and you can understand it, desperate to save her son, but it blinded her to the danger he might have posed, to her family, to the whole monarchy.
And as Russia gets deeper into World War I, Rasputin's reputation just keeps tanking. People blamed him and the Tsarina for all the bad stuff happening. His influence, it was seen as this corrupting force, weakening the war effort. His doom and gloom prophecies didn't help either.
Yeah, it's interesting how Rasputin's image gets tied to Russia's fate like that. He becomes this symbol of everything wrong with the country, right? Corruption, incompetence, believing in mysticism over reason.
And then you have that failed assassination attempt in 1914. Kionia Guseva, this peasant woman, stabs Rasputin, calls him a false prophet.
They said she was insane, but a lot of people thought she was a pawn. Someone was using her. One guy who stands out is Iliador, this former priest. Used to be a Rasputin supporter, but now he's a huge critic. Openly saying Rasputin needs to go, calls him a threat to the church and to the whole nation.
So not just a random act of violence then? More like a sign of how much fear and resentment there was. Almost like, well, a warning of the violence to come.
Exactly. Doesn't kill him, but it shows how fractured things are in Russia, foreshadowing all the turmoil that's about to break loose.
And all that leads up to his murder, which is dramatic and brutal, to say the least. Prince Felix Yusupov, he's the one behind it all, right?
Yep, Yusupov, super rich and influential nobleman. He becomes the mastermind of this plot to get rid of Rasputin for good. He thought Rasputin's control over the Tsarina was so strong, the only way to save the monarchy, to stop Russia from falling apart, was to, well, kill him.
So, that night at the Moika Palace, it's like something out of a spy movie. Yusupov, along with Grand Duke Dmitry Pavlovich and this right-wing politician, Vladimir Purishkevich, they lure Rasputin to the palace, make it seem like a late-night meeting, right?
Yeah.
But the whole plan is super elaborate and, well, pretty chilling.
According to Yusupov's own memoirs, they give Rasputin food and wine laced with cyanide, but get this, the poison doesn't seem to work. Now, some historians think he made that part up, or at least exaggerated it, to make himself look like the hero who saved Russia from this, demonic figure.
So if the poison didn't work, what did they do?
Well, Yusupov's getting desperate, right? Shoots Rasputin point blank. But the story gets even weirder. The conspirators say Rasputin, like he's immune to the bullet or something, gets up and attacks Yusupov. Probably embellished, of course, but it adds to this whole legend of Rasputin being supernaturally tough.
It's like the more we dig into this, the more questions pop up.
That's what makes it so fascinating, right? What happened that night is still a mystery. All these conflicting stories, unanswered questions. Did Yusupov lie about the poison? Was the autopsy accurate? Or did they cover something up to protect the guys who did it? Historians are still arguing about it. Shows how hard it is to find the truth, especially with someone like Rasputin.
And then what happens next? They dump his body in the Neva River, right? Under cover of darkness. Pretty chilling way to go.
Desperation move, trying to hide the evidence, silence the whole thing. But you can't erase history that easily. A few days later, they find Rasputin's body, and boom, shockwaves through Russia. Rumors start flying, speculation, and it still goes on today.
And the Wikipedia page you sent over, it has details from the autopsy report, which, well, it just adds another layer to this whole crazy story.
I know, right? The official autopsy, done by Dmitry Kostratov, it shows 3 bullet wounds, 1 to the head, that's the one that killed him. But there's also signs of a struggle, injuries that happened after he was dead, makes you think it was more brutal than it needed to be, And here's the kicker. The autopsy says there were endotoxins in his system, no poison.
So was he poisoned or not? Every detail is shrouded in uncertainty.
It's like a puzzle with missing pieces. Conflicting stories, questions with no answers. It makes you wonder, did Yusupov just make up the poison part? Was the autopsy wrong? Or was there a cover-up to protect the killers? These are the things historians debate, because truth is hard to find, especially when it comes to a guy like Rasputin.
And what about afterward? What happens when they pull his body out of the river?
Quick burial in Tsarskoye Selo, very low-key funeral, just a few people close to the royal family. His wife and kids weren't even there, which I guess shows how much his crazy life had cost him, even on a personal level.
Yeah. Tragic ending for sure. A life full of extremes, contradictions, the whole deal. But maybe the creepiest detail is that prophecy, the one he supposedly made before he was killed.
Oh yeah, the prophecy. Rasputin said if government officials killed him, the Romanov dynasty would fall. And, well, less than 2 years later, it happened. The whole family, gone.
Makes you think, doesn't it? Coincidence or something more? It definitely adds to the whole mystique around Rasputin.
Whether it was a real prediction or just him being smart about how unstable things were, his words came true. He was dead. But his legacy, tied to the Romanovs like that, it would keep haunting Russia, captivating the world for a long time to come.
It's amazing, Rasputin, over a century later, his story still has this grip on people. Books, documentaries, movies, even a disco song.
I know, right? It's got everything a good story needs. Power, mystery, religion, political drama, and then that violent ending. No wonder it's still so popular.
You said disco song, you're talking about Boney M, right? Rasputin. Hard to believe a song about him, of all people, was a global hit.
It shows you the power of his image, I guess. Transcends time, music, genres, everything. And the song itself, it plays with all the different sides of him, like he's this lover of the Russian queen, but also a holy healer.
It is interesting how different versions of his story focus on different things. Some are all about the mystical powers, others are more about the politics or the scandals in his personal life.
Yeah, and I think that's why we're still so drawn to him, maybe. He doesn't fit neatly into any one box. Was he really a mystic? Thought he had some divine purpose? Or was he just a con man, playing on the Tsarina's desperation? Or, and this is a possibility, maybe he was both. A mix of faith, ambition, maybe even genuine wanting to help people. Who knows?
Tough to say for sure. The sources give us these glimpses into who he was, but in the end, more questions than answers, right?
Exactly. He's an enigma, like a historical Rorschach test. You see what you want to see in him.
And the Tsarina, her belief in Rasputin, it's a huge part of this whole thing. It makes you think about faith, the appeal of someone who says they have spiritual authority, and how even powerful people, when they're scared, uncertain, they can be vulnerable to that.
True. No matter how powerful you are, you're still human. You have weaknesses. The Tsarina, she wanted to save her son so badly. She saw Rasputin as hope in a really dark time. But by doing that, she gave power to a man who, good intentions or not, helped to destabilize her own rule.
Almost Shakespearean, right? A tragedy driven by fate that went too far, political ambition, and, the rumblings of revolution that nobody saw coming.
It's a story that makes you think about power, how empires can be fragile, how easy it is for someone with charisma who claims to have a connection to God to use that for good or for bad.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Grigori Rasputin, what's the big takeaway here? What can our listeners learn from this journey back in time?
Well, Rasputin's story, it's a warning, I think. Think critically. Don't let power go unchecked. And be careful about anyone who claims they have some special connection to the divine. And it shows us that history is complicated, rarely clear-cut.
Yeah, it forces us to look beyond the simple explanations and remember that people, even someone like Rasputin, they're complex, driven by all kinds of things, motives, desires, and some of that might always be a mystery.
I think the biggest lesson from Rasputin is this. Question everything, dig deeper, and remember, the truth is often hard to find, especially when it comes to people who've left such a big mark on history.
Well said. One last thought for you to ponder. What if Rasputin had never met the Romanovs? Would things have turned out differently for them, for Russia? We'll never know. It's all part of the mystery of Rasputin. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Tell us what you think about this episode. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.